Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to D.G. Wills Books in La Jolla, California. Tonight we're honored to have Professor Gideon Rappaport, who will read and discuss his book, William Shakespeare's Hamlet, edited and annotated. Professor Rappaport has taught Shakespeare at Hamilton College, SUNY Cortland, Concordia University, University of New Hampshire, as well as at the Bishop's School and La Jolla Country Day School in La Jolla. Dr. Rappaport has also served as theatrical dramaturge for professional theaters, including the Old Globe, California Shakespeare Festival, the British American Youth Theater, San Diego Rep, North Coast Rep, Intrepid Theater, San Diego Shakespeare Society, as well as school productions at Bishop's and La Jolla Country Day. Though it is one of Shakespeare's greatest and most beloved plays, Hamlet has been repeatedly misunderstood. This is partly because audience assumptions about the nature of reality have undergone huge changes between Shakespeare's time and ours. The result is that for most people, what this great play is really about has been almost entirely obscured. Shakespeare's Hamlet provides precise glosses on the meanings of particular words and phrases as they would have been understood by Shakespeare's audience, and specific suggestions for actors and directors. The commentary demonstrates that the story of Shakespeare's Hamlet is not of a man who could not make up his mind or who thinks too much to act. These and other non-Shakespearean interpretations superimposed on the play in the last 100 years vanish into insignificance in the face of the actual story of Hamlet as revealed in the original meanings of its speeches and their interrelation. That story is of a man who, in a dangerous and paradoxical moral situation, becomes guilty of a tragic moral fall and then undergoes a spiritual turning leading to redemption. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Gideon Rappaport.
Thank you all for coming. That's really wonderful to see everybody here. And thank you, Dennis, for inviting me back to talk about my books on Shakespeare. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. My friend Courtney tells me always to start with a joke, so I'm going to start with 3 stories. 2 of them are comical. The first is my favorite story of last year. It has nothing to do with what I'm talking about tonight, except that the protagonist of the story has a Hamlet-like wit. The kid was stopped for speeding. As he rolled down his window, the policeman got out of his vehicle and approached him, saying, "I've been waiting all day just for you." The kid replied, "Yeah, well, I got here as fast as I could." When the cop finally stopped laughing, he sent the kid on his way without a ticket. That's the other reason I told the story, because it has the word ticket. Okay, the next story is a serious...
Microphone, please. Speak.
Sorry. The next story is a serious Hasidic parable, and it's deeply connected to my topic, as you'll see eventually, I hope. A son was at a distance of 100 days' journey from his father. Said his friend, "Return to your father." He said, "I cannot." His father sent to him and said, "Go as far as you are able, and I shall come the rest of the way to you." There you see the profound intellectual problem of the paradoxical relation between the human free will and divine providence. How much is up to us, and how much is up to God? I will return to this question when we get close to the end of Hamlet's spiritual journey. And there's an old joke on a similar theme. I'm sure you know it, but I'll tell it anyway. So all his life, Goldberg wants to win the lottery. He does nothing but pray to God to win the lottery. "God, please, all I want, you've given me everything I need, but I just want to win the lottery." And he goes on like this for years and years. And finally a voice comes out of the heavens and says, "Goldberg, do me a favor. Meet me halfway. Buy a ticket." The story is universal. It illuminates the paradox we all face. We want the bounty of the divine, but we don't always want to buy the ticket. It reminds me of my late friend Charles Embry's novel, in which there's a character of a judge named Bat T. Savannah, who asks in his courtroom everyone to raise their hands if they want to go to heaven. Now, if I asked you that, it would take a while, but eventually all the hands would go up, and so they do. Then he asks them to put their hands down and now raise their hands if they want to die. As I thought, he says, everyone wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Hamlet is in the same boat, in the to be or not to be soliloquy. He doesn't mind the idea of dying, as he says there, but he doesn't want to end up in hell. And that's the point there. I'll come back to it. Today I'm going to try to help us improve on Goldberg's habit by inviting us to meet Shakespeare halfway. But first I have a trigger warning. You might find that I will be using the word God, and may even be trying to help us meet God halfway. God, of course, is the ultimate persona non grata to various groups these days. Certain evolutionary biologists, all materialists, most Freudians, some feminists, many existentialists, most deconstructionists, all postmodern neo-Marxist critical theorists, and so on. Since in the academic and publishing world these groups make a large majority, I had to publish the book myself. True, times have changed since Shakespeare. The assumptions we bring with us into the theater or into the reading of the play, as you heard Dennis say, have changed. We are the products of a centuries-long revolution against the doctrines of religion, of universal values, of morality itself. I could list the responsible isms: Romanticism, materialism, evolutionism, Marxism, positivism, existentialism, modernism, postmodernism, deconstructionism, neo-Marxism, commercialism, ecologism, and bureaucratism. I could probably go on and add some more. But as Alexander Solzhenitsyn implies about the revolutions of history, they tend to throw the baby out with the bath. And the supposed success of all those isms is usually followed quite directly by plain old despair. Here's what Solzhenitsyn actually says. This is a quote. I took this from the Gulag Archipelago. It's part 4, or part of part 4. It's a very long book. Gradually it was disclosed to me that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart, and through all human hearts. This line shifts. Inside us, it oscillates with the years, and even within the hearts overwhelmed with evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. And even in the best of all hearts, there remains an unuprooted small corner of evil. Hamlet calls it the dram of evil. Since then I have come to understand, says Solzhenitsyn, the truth of all the religions of the world. They struggle with the evil inside a human being, inside every human being. It is impossible to expel evil from the world in its entirety, but it is possible to constrict it within each person. And since that time, I have come to understand the falsehood of all the revolutions of history, that long list I gave you. They destroy only those carriers of evil contemporary with them, and also fail out of haste to discriminate the carriers of good as well. And they take to themselves as their heritage the actual evil itself, magnified still more. So that's kind of background to why I had to write this book. The basic story of Hamlet is not what you've been told by my long list of revolutionaries and their conscious or unconscious followers. It is not, as Olivier says in the voiceover to his movie of Hamlet, the story of a man who could not make up his mind. No. Nor is Hamlet Oedipally in love with his mother, as Freudian Ernest Jones believed and wrote. Nor is Hamlet a relativist. Nor is he a person who can't decide whether to be a soldier or an intellectual. Nor does he think too much to act. Nor is he mad. Nor is he systematically melancholy. Nor does he have ulterior motives. He is not a minority person oppressed by an oppressive power structure. He is not cruel and unfeeling, and obligated to feel guilty over the death of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. He does or does not feel guilty for having slept with Ophelia before marriage. Absolutely no evidence. He is really a woman. That was a serious study. Need I say, absolutely no evidence. Nor is Hamlet a problem play, which was a category the 19th century invented, and it hasn't recovered from it. Of course, Hamlet himself has a serious problem, but the play is perfectly coherent so long as we let Shakespeare mean what he intends to mean. It was to show this that I had to edit and annotate the play myself. The only way that I felt I could make this argument stick is to do the whole play. Every line, what does it mean? How does it relate to the other lines? And how is there a through line that's been ignored? I can only hope that I've now done enough in the form of this book to make my argument stick. Tonight I'm going to take you briefly and quickly through the real and essential through line of the story of Hamlet. That is the backbone of the play. What's the main arc of the drama? For the full story, of course, I hope you'll read the play and study it in my edition, which by grace and good fortune you may purchase in hardcover or softcover tonight in this very room. We'll start with some platitudes. Let's see here. You probably remember that Polonius gives some precepts to his son Laertes, who's leaving Denmark to go back to France and live it up as a young man. Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast in their adoption tried, grapple them to thy soul with hoops of steel, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new-hatched, unfledged courage, meaning young blade, young man. Beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in, bear it that the opposed may beware of thee. Don't get in fights, but if you get in a fight, win. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. And he goes on and on. You remember neither a borrower nor a lender be, and he tells you why. And then he finishes thus. First of all, before he finishes, what is he telling Laertes? He's telling him, everything you do, do it in the golden mean. That's what Aristotle defined as virtue. Not too much this way, not too much that way, right? Courage is a mean between foolhardiness on the one hand and pusillanimity or fearfulness on the other. You've got to strike the balance, and that puts Polonius right in a very long tradition from Aristotle. He concludes thus: this above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. If you're true to yourself, you can't be false to others. This does not mean follow your bliss, or go with your gut feeling, or do what you want to. This means be true and faithful and loyal to yourself, meaning virtuous. Do the right thing for yourself, and you will be doing the right thing for others. So that is a major theme of the play, because the ghost appears to Hamlet and says, do this thing. I'll read you the lines. Avenge my foul and most unnatural murder, says the ghost, but taint not thy mind. Howsoever thou pursues this act, taint not thy mind. Avenge my murder, but don't do it by ruining your own character. Now, how is that possible? All right, we're going to come back to that. I'm going back a little earlier to Hamlet's, the heart that Solzhenitsyn said is in everyone has a tiny bit of evil. And Hamlet, when Horatio appears in Act 1, Scene 2, asks Horatio why he's left school at Wittenberg and come to Denmark. And Horatio says, my lord, I came to see your father's funeral. And Hamlet says, with irony, I pray thee, do not mock me, fellow student. I think it was to see my mother's wedding. And Horatio gets what he's saying. And he says, indeed, my lord, it followed hard upon, meaning it came pretty quickly afterwards. Yes, I see why you would say that, right? And then Hamlet says, wittily, like that boy in the speeding boy, thrift, thrift, Horatio. The funeral baked meats did coldly furnish forth the marriage tables. In other words, the hot plates that were served for the funeral, when they cooled off, were served for the wedding. Now, we know that food doesn't last 2 months, but that's Hamlet's exaggeration to make the point. And then he says this, would I had met my dearest foe in heaven, or ever I had seen that day, Horatio. I wish I'd met my worst enemy in heaven before seeing the day that my mother married this horrible uncle. Now, what's wrong with saying that? What is a Christian to do? And I'm using the word Christian on purpose, because this play was written in the midst of a long run of the Spanish tragedy, which was a very popular revenge play, as Hamlet is a revenge play, in the previous decades. And the thing about the revenge plays up until Hamlet is that they were set in a universe that was classical or pseudo-classical. People who died went to the underworld of Hades. They were judged by Minos and Rhadamanthus. If a ghost returned to the world, it was because of them, and so on. And the ideal was aristocratic revenge, right? That's where we get our feuding families from. You kill my brother-in-law, I'm going to go kill your brother-in-law, etc. And then it goes on. And Hamlet is thinking, my worst enemy is the person I do not want to see in heaven. But what is Christianity teaching people? Hello? Love your enemy. Not just love your friend, right? Love even your enemy. It's an extreme command. And here is Hamlet saying, the worst thing that could happen is to see his mother marry his uncle. The next to worst thing is to see his worst enemy in heaven. His worst enemy presumably should be in hell. That moment, that statement, which is ignored, it's just treated as a joke, is the dram of evil that Hamlet talks about when he talks about the dram of evil. Which is, let's see, yes. So oft it chances in particular men that for some vicious mole of nature in them, or by the o'ergrowth of some complexion, I'm skipping lines, or by some habit, carrying, they say, the stamp of one defect, his virtues else be they as pure as grace, as infinite as man may undergo, shall in the general censure take corruption from that particular fault. Whoops, sorry. He's talking about the Danes drinking and shooting off cannon and trumpets when the king takes a drink. And that custom makes Denmark traduced by other nations, insulted. It takes away from their reputation. And that's what they were talking about. And then Hamlet says, so oft it happens in particular men. It's not just in nations where you can lose your reputation for one characteristic. An individual person can lose not just his reputation. When he says general censure, that has two meanings. It means the general criticism of others, but it also means the last judgment, doomsday, when all souls are judged for heaven or hell. So in the general censure, such a person can take corruption from that particular fault. Then he says, the dram of evil doth all the noble substance of a do out. Do out is actually printed doubt, but there's a great emendation by J.V. Cunningham. Do out means do in, like she done him in, you know that phrase? Destroy. To his own scandal. And scandal in this context can mean damnation. So he is saying abstractly, generally, a person can have one flaw and that can lead to his damnation, even if all his other virtues are great, as we know Hamlet's virtues are. All right, Another element of the revenge play tradition is madness. And Hamlet plays at madness. He is never mad. He is passionate and reasonable. His soliloquies go in usually a pattern. He flies into a passion for an external reason, not invented by his own mind, but real, and then he becomes rational again. You can see that pattern in the soliloquies. But he is sometimes passionate, sometimes rational, and in both he can be playing at madness. So he can be playing at madness while he's ranting and raving about something, and he can be playing at madness while he's perfectly calm and rational. Okay? So you have to distinguish depending on who's talking to. Now, the distinction is pretty clear in the play. Polonius jumps to the conclusion, because Hamlet wants him to, that Hamlet is mad for thwarted love. That is a classic stage cliche of the time. You don't get your way in love, you can go mad. Girls waste away, and boys go do something extravagant and destructive. Okay, like speed on the freeway or whatever. There's another connection. Or you can be mad for thwarted ambition. And that's what Rosencrantz and Guildenstern accuse him of. They immediately start talking about you are frustrated because you haven't advanced in society. You were supposed to be the heir to the throne, but your uncle stepped in. So now you're not the heir to the, or now you are the heir to the throne, but you're not the king. And so you have ambition. So what Hamlet does, because these two sets of men have accused him of these two different things, you can go mad for thwarted love, you can go mad for thwarted ambition. He plays at being mad for love to Polonius and Ophelia, and he plays at being mad for ambition, thwarted ambition, to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and sometimes to the king himself. But he's never mad. So one of my footnotes says, there are two, or in the introduction I think I wrote, there are two rules about Hamlet's madness. Number one, he's never mad. Number two, if he's doing something that makes you think he is actually mad, read rule number one. All right. Now, what's to be or not to be about? Anyone?
What? What's the question?
What is to be or not to be about?
That is the question.
Let's see, it's page...
To exist or commit suicide?
No. Close.
Hamlet won't tell us.
Close. So first of all, to be or not to be, that is the question. What does he mean by question?
Issue.
In Wittenberg and all the universities of the time, and among all the religious founded universities, there was what was called a quaestio, meaning question. And it didn't mean just question mark kind of question. It meant an issue to be debated. And in the morning, the rector of the institution, let's say Wittenberg, would ask a question. Does man have free will? Does God exist? They were fundamental. Is it better to be alive or dead? Should you love your neighbor or not? And then the boys would discuss it all day while they were doing their lessons and their classes and studying their Latin and their divinity and so on. And at the end of the day, the rector would take the stand at dinner and give a short talk on the true, doctrinally correct answer to the question. Okay? That's what Hamlet means by that is the question. And what he does is a classical, university-trained argument on both sides of the question. If you open up St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, and you see that it's arranged by questions. There's a question, and then there's a proposed answer, and then there's reasons to reject that answer, and then there's a proposed contrary answer and reasons to reject that answer, and then Thomas Aquinas comes to a conclusion and says, this is the right answer, based on doctrine. Okay? That's exactly what Hamlet does in this argument. It's better to be dead because then you don't have to suffer all the slings and arrows of life. But the thought, the dread of something after death, okay? To die, to sleep, no more, and by a sleep. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. This is why people say Hamlet is suicidal. He's not suicidal. He doesn't want to kill himself. He knows that God has fixed his canon against self-slaughter. He said that earlier in a soliloquy. So he's not going to commit suicide. He's asking the question why people don't. And then he says, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, got rid of our bodies, must give us pause. That makes us stop. At the end of the speech, he says, conscience does make cowards of us all. What he means, conscience here, has a very specific meaning. It means the awareness of having done wrong. So if you are going to do something that might get you killed, even though you're passionately wanting to do it, like kill Claudius, if it's damnable and you end up being damned for it, it's not worth it. It's not the thing to do. And that's why people don't go running off and kill the king, even though they want to, and even though they have good reason to, without first finding out whether the guy's really guilty. You with me? Okay. So when he says, thus conscience does make cowards of us all, he means the awareness of having done wrong makes us cowards to do something that might get us killed because it might lead to not heaven, but hell. Okay, we all want to go to heaven. We don't want to go to hell. So then, enterprises of great pitch and moment, like executing the king, as the ghost told him to do, with this regard their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. And then he sees Ophelia, and he's very calm and quiet until he notices that the king and Polonius or somebody is listening in on their conversation. And then he flies into a rage, pretending to be mad, but in a rage. All right. Now, the climax of the play. Act 3, Scene 3, is the climax of the play. So Hamlet has said, I forgot to say this, in the soliloquy that comes just before the to be or not to be, he has said, the ghost I've seen may be a devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape, and maybe he is abusing me to damn me. Maybe the ghost wasn't his father. Maybe it wasn't sent from heaven to evoke justice from him. Maybe it's the devil trying to damn him. I'll have grounds more relative than this, and then he decides he's going to do this play, this little play, illustrating the murder as the ghost described it, and see what happens. And what happens is Claudius rises up and rushes out, light, revealing to Hamlet and to Horatio, the rational man in this play, that he is guilty. Okay, now Hamlet believes the ghost was telling the truth. He has his evidence. Claudius comes in, and I'm going to illustrate what we see, okay? I'm not going to say anything. Shakespeare's audience went to hear a play, not see a play. But I'm going to show you what they see, and then I'm going to tell you something about what they hear. All right, so in comes Claudius. He's miserable, he's agonized, and he kneels to pray. In comes Hamlet behind him, you're kneeling and praying. Pulls out his sword, puts it away, and walks out. What does it look like? Tell me. What does it look like?
He's about to kill Claudius and thinks better of it.
Thinks he shouldn't do it. Why would somebody not kill someone praying? Why would a Christian prince not kill someone praying?
He has no sin on his soul at that point.
He's repenting, and it looks like mercy. It looks like mercy. All right. So here's what we hear Claudius say. My offense is rank, it smells to heaven. It hath the primal eldest curse upon it. That's the curse of Cain and for killing Abel, his brother. He's killed his brother. A brother's murder. That is the moment. We know that Claudius is feeling guilty early in the play, but that's the moment where we know that that's what he's feeling guilty about. Pray can I not, he says, though inclination be as sharp as will, my stronger guilt defeats my strong intent. And then he says, what if this cursed hand were thicker than itself with brother's blood? Is there not rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow? What's the theological answer to that? Yes. There is. What does he have to do in order to wash it white as snow?
He has to repent.
He has to repent. Good. Whereto serves mercy but to confront the visage of offense? And what's in prayer but this twofold force? To be forestalled ere we come to fall. You pray in order not to fall, or pardoned, being down, having fallen already. Then I'll look up, my fault is past. But oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder? That cannot be, since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder, my crown, mine own ambition, and my queen. May one be pardoned and retain the offense? Answer? No. In the corrupted currents of this world, offense's gilded hand may shove by justice. And oft to seen the wicked prize itself buys out the law. You steal the money and you use it to pay off the DA, or the judge, or the jury. But 'tis not so above. There is no shuffling. There the action lies in his true nature, and we ourselves compelled, even to the teeth and forehead of our faults, to give in evidence. Try what repentance can. What can it not? Yet what can it when one cannot repent? Oh, wretched state, oh, bosom black as death. Okay. He bows stubborn knees, he kneels. All may be well. So, he kneels to pray. Now, what do we know? We know that he's guilty. We know that he's a murderer. We know that he's having a hard time repenting because he won't give up his crown, his ambition, his queen. And he kneels to pray. Hamlet has not heard this. All he does is see him praying. It's a soliloquy, which means no one else on stage hears it, only the audience. All right, Hamlet comes in and says this. Now, I have to give you a little lesson first. Almost everyone who's written about this play has invented what Hamlet really means here. Because he's not telling us what he really means. As if Shakespeare wrote in subtext. And it's not the case. In Shakespeare, the characters say what they mean. There may be a tone, if there's anything going on that they're not actually saying, if they mean something besides what they're saying, somebody somewhere has to tell us that. We don't guess it, we don't assume it. We're watching the play, we can't. That's not true of modern theater, but it is true of Shakespeare. So we're going to take Hamlet at his word. What does he say? Now might I do it, Pat. Now he is a-praying, and now I'll do it. He draws his sword, and so he goes to heaven, because presumably he looks like he's repenting, and so am I revenged. Okay. Should Hamlet kill Claudius at this moment?
No.
Yes. Wrong.
Yes.
Why did you say no? You're a lawyer.
He doesn't know, but he thinks.
I'm talking about from our point of view. Do we think Hamlet should execute Claudius? Who is the rightful king of Denmark?
Hamlet.
Hamlet. Who is the authority for justice in the state of Denmark? The king. This man is now proven to us to be guilty of regicide and fratricide and incest. Incest in intention, if not in fact. And Hamlet is the man for the job. Precisely because he can fly into a passion, or precisely because he can reason his way to do it, we expect him to do it. And he doesn't. Why not? He says, and so he goes to heaven, and so am I revenged. That would be scanned. I got to look at that. Scan, like it's scanning a verse for the stresses of the line. A villain kills my father, and for that I, his sole son, do this same villain send to heaven. That's the aristocratic voice coming out. Why, this is higher in salary, not revenge. I want revenge. He took my father grossly full of bread, with all his crimes broad blown as flesh is made. In other words, not giving his brother, Claudius didn't give his brother the king, time to repent before he died. And how Claudius's audit in heaven stands, who knows save heaven? That's true. No one does. We do, the audience, but Hamlet doesn't. Does he take that to heart, that sentence that should stop him from what he's about to do? He doesn't. He ignores it, just the way Polonius ignores his own advice to Laertes. I didn't say that before, but he does. That's why he becomes a comic and tragic character. How his audit stands, who knows save heaven, but in our circumstance and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him. And am I then revenged to take him in the purging of his soul, when he is fit and seasoned for his passage? That word is the climax of the play. It's 2 letters, and the word is no. Am I revenged? No. Up sword, puts away his sword, and know thou a more horrid hint. When he is drunk asleep, or in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, at game, a swearing, or about some act that has no relish of salvation in it, then trip him, that his heels may kick at heaven, and that his soul may be as damned and black as hell, whereto it goes. And he walks out to go see his mother. He was on his way to his mother. Now, what just happened? Oh, he's afraid to kill him? No. Oh, he thinks too much? No. Oh, he's in love with his mother? No. He can't make up it? No. He makes up his mind. His mind is made up to kill Claudius when he will send him to hell. Is that Hamlet's job? No. Whose job is that? Uh-oh, trigger warning. It's only God who can decide such things. Hamlet's job, God instructed, because now he knows the ghost is honest, is to kill the guy, execute him. Now, he probably would be damned, because guess what we find out the minute Hamlet walks out? The king gets up from his knees and says, my words fly up, my thoughts remain below. Words without thoughts never to heaven go. So what do we know? Did he repent?
He wasn't praying.
No. So if he'd been killed here, he probably would have been damned unless there was special mercy. But it's not Hamlet's job. But Hamlet's dram of evil, that not wanting to see his worst enemy in heaven, kicks in at this moment. And Hamlet's fall is worse than that of Claudius. Why? Claudius killed his brother to get stuff in the world. The wife, the power. Hamlet is playing God and wants his uncle damned. Dead isn't good enough for him, for his personal desire for revenge. All right, so what happens in the next scene? All those people who say Hamlet's afraid to act are just talking nonsense, because in the next scene he acts. What does he think? Claudius is behind the arras. Now he's in some act that has no relish of salvation in it, and he stabs him. How do I know that he thinks it's the king? Because he says so. I took thee, to Polonius, I took thee for thy better. I hope I'm not giving away endings here. He stabs through the arras thinking it's the king, and it turns out to be Polonius. So in Act 3, Scene 3, he couldn't see past Claudius's gesture into his soul. In Act 3, Scene 4, he cannot even see through a curtain into who it is behind the curtain. Because he's become spiritually blind in 3:3, he becomes physically blind in 3:4, and he kills the wrong man. And guess what's going to happen because of that? Polonius also has a son who also wants revenge. and he's going to kill Hamlet under the tutelage of the corrupt king. All right, so if my argument is, if we take Hamlet, if we take Shakespeare at his word, what we get here is Hamlet's spiritual, moral fall. And he remains in that condition through the rest of the act. We see him seeing Fortinbras going off to Poland, and he meditates on that. I'm cursed for I haven't acted. I don't know why this thing's to do. Well, we know why, because he didn't do it at the crucial right moment that it should have been done. And so everything goes wrong as a result. However, that's not the end of the play. In Act 5, Scene 1, there's a debate between the two gravediggers about Ophelia's death. So from Ophelia's point of view, she's had a rotten life, right? Because she's in love with Hamlet, rightly so, and her brother says, beware, he might not mean it. She says, okay, I'll be careful. And then her father says, dump him completely. And she does, in obedience. And then he goes mad, and he comes into her as if he were mad for love. It's an act, but she doesn't know it. And she tells her father, and he says, mad for thy love, he's sure. So then, in his madness, he kills her father. So now, here's Ophelia. Her brother's gone to France, her lover's gone mad and killed her father, and she thinks it's her fault. But what could she do? She's stuck in a horrible, tragic situation. She can't disobey her father. All right, so she's carrying this weight that isn't hers, but she doesn't know it. And she, in her madness, falls into the water and drowns. And the gravediggers are trying to figure out, did she mean it or not? Why? Because if she meant it, then her soul is damned. You're not allowed to commit suicide. But if she didn't mean it, there could be mercy, because maybe God will understand that she didn't know what she was doing. And so, you know, they argue it in a very comical way. And it isn't long before they come in with the corpse of poor Ophelia, and Laertes is arguing with the doctor of the church, the priest, about why she's got these limited funeral ceremonies. And he says, look, her death was questionable, and only the king overruled us, otherwise she would have been buried in unhallowed ground, and so on. And Laertes says, my sister will be a ministering angel when you lie howling, heaven and hell. She's going to heaven and you're going to hell. Same argument as between the two gravediggers, and same pretentiousness in both the priest and Laertes about knowing what happens to a soul after death. Shakespeare's point is that we cannot know how his audit stands. Who knows save heaven? We know about Claudius's audit, but we don't know about Ophelia's. And we're never told it. We're only shown people who are jumping to the conclusion one way or the other. Now, what else goes on in that scene is the gravediggers digging up skulls. You remember this. And he tosses up a skull and another skull and another skull. And first of all, Hamlet thinks, oh, that's the skull of a lawyer. And then another one, oh, that's the skull of a man who bought a lot of properties. And now his body takes up space in the earth that's smaller than it would take to put all his paperwork in. And then he thinks about Caesar and Alexander the Great, the two greatest conquering heroes, aristocratic conquering heroes of history. And they're going to end up dust. And then in comes the funeral procession with Ophelia, his beloved. So what Shakespeare has done in this scene, the next to last scene of the play, is to give us what's called a memento mori. Remember that you die. The monks in medieval times and in paintings would often have on their desk right there a skull, a human skull, some brother monk from, 100 years ago, to contemplate it as a regular thing. Why? What do you learn from contemplating that?
How close you are to death.
Yes, that you're always close to death, that this is going to be you, and therefore you need to be what? Humble and virtuous. You need to be humble. Memento mori is a lesson about humility. You can be as proud, as puffed up, as rich, as glorious, as triumphant, as conquering as Caesar and Alexander, and you still end up like this. And then before I forgot to mention, he also sees Yorick. So it goes from a random lawyer and a random landowner to Yorick, whom he knew, to Caesar and Alexander, the greatest exemplars for a prince like Hamlet, to Ophelia, his beloved. It is a scene of profound humility. But at the end of it, Laertes, in grief, jumps into the grave of Ophelia and curses Hamlet, and Hamlet flies into a rage. He's not mad, he's just angry. But he pretends at madness, and what would eat a crocodile, he goes, sounds crazy at these extremes. So what we learn here is that whatever Hamlet learned while he was gone, and whatever he's learned in this memento mori scene, it's not a change in personality. He still flies into passions, and then he waxes reasonable again. That's still happening. That's not what spiritual illumination changes. It doesn't change who you are. Okay, well, what does change? What is changed? So Hamlet is describing to Horatio the sea voyage. And the sea voyage was filled with what looked like accidents or coincidences. He happens not to be able to sleep. He decides to go down and sneak the letter that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are carrying to England, which we know contains instructions for Hamlet to be killed by the King of England. Hamlet doesn't know that, and he doesn't know what Rosencrantz and Guildenstern know, but he has this impulse. Our indiscretion sometimes serves us well when our deep plots do pall. So, and then he happens to have learned how to write like the king's scribe when he was young. And he happens to have in his possession a ring that has the seal of Denmark on it. And he rewrites this commission saying, put the bearers to death. Why? Not because he's bloodthirsty, but because he is saving his life, the life of the rightful king of Denmark, by having the bearers instead of himself put to death. And he doesn't know what Rosencrantz and Guildenstern know. That's why he says later, they are not near my conscience. I don't feel guilty about them. They did make love to this employment. Okay. And he doesn't know what's going to happen next, which is there's a pirate ship that attacks them. And Hamlet, who earlier said, am I a coward? And people like to think, well, maybe he's a coward. No, he's not. He jumps aboard the pirate ship, the first one, to fight the pirates, and the ships accidentally, maybe, separate. And I alone became their prisoner. So Rosencrantz and Guildenstern go off to England carrying this rewritten message, and he gets carried back to Denmark by the pirates, who turn out not to be vicious thugs the way pirates generally were, but they're going to do him a good turn, he's going to do them a good turn. In all this, Hamlet says to Horatio, why even in that, how is this sealed, Horatio says. Hamlet says, why even in that was heaven ordinant. I had my father's signet in my purse. Heaven was ordinant. Ordo means order. To ordinate is to put things in order, to arrange things, yes? Okay. So he's seeing that all of these events were put together not by him, but by providence. And so he says, well, he's already said, let's see. What he's learned, our indiscretion sometimes serves us well when our deep plots do pall, and that should learn us, he says to Horatio. Horatio's the bosom friend, who's the rational man. There's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. Now, my argument is this. We talked about free will and predestination, yes? It's a very hard theological problem. If man has free will, God doesn't then control everything we do. But nothing happens in the world that isn't in God's control, so how can we have free will? But we're given free will. We're told we are. But, you see the paradox. So Shakespeare doesn't solve the paradox. He doesn't resolve it. He doesn't end it. He names it with a metaphor. There's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. So if you're going to sculpt something in wood or stone, what do you do first? You rough it out. You rough hew it. H-E-W, right? Chop. And then you shape it. So the way the metaphor works is God does the shaping of what we rough out with our choices, our free will choices. And Horatio's response to that sentence is, that is most certain. That is true. That's the way things work. There's a divinity that shapes our ends, rough hew them how we will. Okay. And then he says, I'm the only one who's ever understood why Osric comes in with this hat. But you're going to buy the book and read it, so I won't explain. I'm also the only one who's correctly explained, thanks to my friend Charles Selberg, who was a fencing master, why the fencing instructions work perfectly. It's not confusing. The editors have all been confused because they didn't know that in Renaissance fencing, you attacked not by moving towards somebody, but by running past him. And so they couldn't distinguish between a bout and a pass. But there are two different things. I explain that too in the notes. Okay. So there's all the Osric satire. And then Hamlet gets this feeling. This is typical Shakespeare. Antonio begins The Merchant of Venice, I know not why I am so sad. And we're not told why he is. It's not this, it's not this, it's not this. And it turns out in the course of the play, we find out why he was sad at the beginning. It was a premonition. Very standard and typical in Shakespeare. Hamlet's getting a premonition. Thou wouldst not think how ill all's here about my heart, he says to Horatio, before the fencing match. And Horatio says, well then don't. And Hamlet says, it is but foolery, but it is such a kind of gain-giving, the women aren't going to like this, as perhaps might trouble a woman. Not a heroic man, but I'm feeling it, because he has an intuition. It's given him. He's got a premonition. And Horatio says, if your mind dislike anything, obey it. I will forestall their repair hither and say you are not fit to participate in this fencing match. Hamlet, not a whit. We defy augury. Augury means prediction, yes? Augurs are the people who tell the future. We defy augury. That doesn't mean we deny what's going to happen or we can pretend to know. He means, like, she defies description. You know that use of the word? She is beyond description. She can't be described. We, human beings, defy augury. We can't be predicted about by human beings. We don't know the future. And we can't figure it out. There is special providence. Now he's learned this from this sea voyage. All that heaven was ordinate in. There is special providence in the fall of a sparrow, meaning even a sparrow. That's referring to the New Testament, yes? No sparrow falls without your Father in heaven knowing it. He counts the hairs of our head and so on. There is special providence even in the fall, that's the meaning, in the fall of a sparrow. If it be now, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, it will be now. If it be not now, yet it will come. The readiness is all. And then he says a sentence which has driven editors of Hamlet mad for 400 years, because it exists in two different versions in the early texts, neither of them correct, neither of them clear. So my best guess is this: since no man of aught he leaves knows what is to leave betimes, let be. And I would argue that let be, and I just had this confirmed by a man I've worked with who's a very fine Shakespearean actor. Let be is the answer to that no of the climax of the play. It's not my job. Let it be. Whatever happens, it's arranged not by me. And it's sort of like that moment in King Lear when Lear says, "Pray you undo this button." And it's the physical, undo the button of my shirt, I can't breathe, because his heart is breaking. But it also means whatever button connects the soul to the body, let it go. And here, let be. The readiness is all. Okay. Now what happens? The climax happens. They have the sword fight. It's poisoned. Hamlet's struck by Laertes, who's lied and said he forgives him when he hasn't forgiven him and he's planning to kill him. And then they switch swords, and then Hamlet wounds Laertes, so they're both dying of this poisoned sword. And Laertes says about the king, he is justly served. It is a poison tempered by himself. That's the poison that Gertrude drank. And Laertes then, dying, says, "Exchange forgiveness with me, noble Hamlet. Mine and my father's death come not upon thee, nor thine on me." What's he asking?
Forgiveness for...
Mutual forgiveness. Laertes is late coming to that table, but he gets it right at the last moment. Because people have clarity often on their deathbeds in Shakespeare. That's a common thing. What's Hamlet's answer? "No, you son of a bitch, you killed me. Go to hell." Is it? No. Heaven make thee free of it. He forgives his worst enemy. Not really his worst enemy. Claudius is his worst enemy, but he forgives his murderer. That dram of evil in Hamlet that we saw before is gone. All right, now I'm going to go back into the play, and then I'll take questions. We started with platitudes, and we're going to end with platitudes of a different sort. Hamlet is going to use these players to produce a scene that will evoke Claudius's guilt, and it works. But before that, he's telling them how to prepare. And he says, "Speak the speech, I pray you, as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. But if you mouth it as many of your players do, I had as lief the town crier spoke my lines. Nor do not saw the air too much with your hand thus, but use all gently. For in the very torrent tempest, and as I may say, whirlwind of your passion, you must acquire and beget a temperance." That's that balance between extremes that may give it smoothness. Okay, it offends me to the soul to hear somebody out Heroding Herod, avoid it. And then the next thing is, be not too tame, neither. What's tame? The opposite of shouting and sawing the air. But let your own discretion be your tutor. Suit the action to the word to the action. Okay, that's fine. We get that, right? You're saying something, you want to, if you're an actor, you're saying something and you want to make the action fit the word. But the Renaissance audience is hearing also in that word, a rather important line from the Gospel of John, which is, in the beginning was the Word. Suit the action to the word. With this special observance that you o'erstep not the modesty of nature. For anything so overdone, is from the purpose of playing, meaning acting, whose end both at the first and now was and is to hold us toward the mirror up to nature, show virtue her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very age and body of the time his form and pressure. That's what Shakespeare's trying to do in Hamlet, showing us our true nature. Now, this overdone or come tardy off, if you overdo it or you wait and do it too late, though it make the unskillful laugh, cannot but make the judicious grieve. Those who have judgment are going to be sorry that you're overdoing it or coming too late to it. The censure of the which one in your allowance must o'erweigh a whole theatre of others. One person who has good judgment should outweigh, in his opinion, the judgment of a whole theater full of theater goers who don't know anything. But it's not just that. There is one whose judgment counts in the playing of our plays in life. And that judgment is more important than the opinions of everybody around us. You hearing this? You hearing the two layers? Oh, there be players that I've seen play and heard others praise, that having neither the accent of Christian nor the gait of Christian, pagan, nor man, have so strutted and bellowed that I have thought some of nature's journeymen had made men and not made them well. They imitated humanity so abominably. I hope we have reformed that indifferently with us. Reform it altogether. He's describing what he is going to be. He's retarded his action because he hasn't killed Claudius in 3-3 when he should have. He's overdone it because he's not just killed him, he's wanting to send him to hell. He is disobeying his own advice to the players. And then he says, and let those that play your clowns speak no more than is set down for them, for there be of them that will themselves laugh to set on some quantity of barren spectators to laugh too, though in the meantime some necessary question of the play be then to be considered. You're worrying about your own desire for revenge instead of cleansing Denmark in time to prevent the death of the entire royal family. That's villainous and shows a most pitiful ambition in the fool that uses it. Hamlet was guilty of ambition, not to be king, but to be God. And he ends to the players by saying what? Go make you ready. The readiness is all. Okay, I'll take questions.
A question from Robert?
And the first words are who's there.
Yes.
There's a lot more than just a guardsman looking for the Norwegian.
Absolutely right. There's been a ghost seen twice already. So who's there means what's really going on. I also didn't talk about orders, instructions to people to behave a certain way. Do it, don't overdo it. Do it in the right way at the right time. They run throughout the play. There are hundreds of examples, and I've given a whole list of them in the introduction. So, but the main one is the ghost saying to Hamlet, this problem. So Shakespeare is saying, okay, this is a revenge play, but revenge itself is on trial. Is a man allowed to commit revenge, to have revenge? What does the Bible say about revenge?
Vengeance is mine.
Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. And here's the ghost saying, avenge my murder. Is it from God? How can it be? Is he to obey the ghost or is he to obey the scripture? And it turns out he's to obey both. Because both the instructions to kill Claudius come from God and the instructions not to not kill him out of your own desire for him to be damned. You have to walk that line between those extremes and see the difference. And it's all the difference in the world. It's the difference between pride and humility. It's the difference between service and what? Kingship. Yes?
Part 3.3, if he does kill Claudius,
Yeah.
and he enjoys it, would he then be trying to be God?
If he does it in 3.3, as I'm arguing, we expect him to do and he should do, because not doing it is his fall. He does it out of two possible motives. One is that indiscretion that serves us well when our deep plots do pall. That is a passion. It flies into a passionate rage and kills the king. Now he knows he's guilty, right? He was going to fly into a passionate rage immediately and kill the king, but he didn't do it because he's also rational. And he said, wait a minute, I don't want to be damned for this. He's thinking about damnation and salvation. So if he now knows the king is guilty and flies into a passion, he's not enjoying it, he's just expressing the need of the moment. If, on the contrary, he is being governed by his rationality at this moment, he says, look, this man's a murderer, he's a fratricidal murderer, incestuous one, I am the rightful king of Denmark, nobody else is going to get rid of this guy but me. It's my job to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to pray God that it's the right thing to do. The ghost has told me. The ghost proves to be true. I'm going to do it in justice. Either of those would have been fine. Neither of those is wanting him damned. The fall comes in, am I then revenged? No. I'm not revenged. Never mind God's revenge. Never mind justice for the state. Right? Me. That's the aristocratic value entering in. And Shakespeare has said, I'm going to write a play where the context isn't fictional underworld, classical underworld. I'm going to write a play set in the real Christian world, the real universe of God and his judgments. And I'm going to look at this problem of free will and predestination. I'm going to look at this problem of in what way could such a person in that situation take revenge and not be guilty in the eyes of God? Or in what way would he become guilty in the eyes of God? And the whole study becomes a study of the inner life of Hamlet. That's the drama of this play. From that dram of evil to the fall to the memento mori to there's a divinity that shapes our ends, few them how we will, to let be. And finally to heaven make thee free of it. That's the arc of the play. Anyone who tells you different is imposing on the play other concerns. They may be political, they may be social, they may be sexual, they may be anything. And they are getting in the way of that line of drama that Shakespeare's audience would have recognized clearly, because it's in the language. And we ignore it. Actors, directors, critics simply ignore those lines that I've been stressing to you because they don't want to think about that. They don't want God to be part of Shakespeare's corpus. They want to what? Convert him away from religion to secularism to make themselves feel better. I'm sorry, my response is write your own damn play. This play is about that. Yes.
Yes, speaking of that, Harold Bloom even called that the politicization of Shakespeare. So, but anyway, on page 308 of your book, Appreciating Shakespeare, you wrote that Hamlet is the dramatized story of an intelligent man. Now, do you agree with Harold Bloom's assessment that Hamlet is the most intelligent character in all of literature?
All of literature, that's a big
And
category.
so why or why not?
Let's say he's very intelligent, and let's say comparisons are odorous or odious. That's also a quote. I don't know. How do you measure that? He's extremely intelligent, but that's not the point of the play. He's intelligent because it's entertaining for us to see his mind at work. But the point of the play isn't his intellect. The point of the play is the attempt to balance passion and reason, right? Feelings and intellect in a moral, temperate way, which doesn't taint the soul. And he fails, and then he gets it right. And they all do, by the way. Horatio goes through the same arc, but very late. So he's rational to the very end, and then he's about to kill himself by drinking that poison at the end. And Hamlet stops him. Just as Providence stopped Hamlet, Hamlet stops Horatio. Fortinbras does it early. He goes off in a passion to conquer part of Denmark and fight with the king, and his uncle calls him back, and he repents, and then the uncle gives him an actual job to go to Poland, and he does go to Poland, and he wins, and on his way back, Denmark, all of Denmark, not just the portion he was fighting for, falls in his lap, because he surrendered his self-will to the rightful authority of his king uncle, Fortinbras. Laertes the same. He wants revenge on Hamlet. He lies, he fakes, he kills him, but at the last minute he's dying and he repents. And so they all have this arc of learning. The only person who doesn't learn, and of course Gertrude learns in the scene with Hamlet when he accuses her of what should we call it, accessory to murder and incest and all that. And she gets it, and she feels guilty, and she promises not to give him away, that he's not really mad. That's the scene that has another major example of proof that Hamlet's not mad. And she keeps true to that till she dies, and her death is her penance. But she goes wrong before the play begins, and then she goes right after she's corrected by Hamlet. So all of these characters are, including Osric, by the way, in a comic way, are tested by reality and fail and then succeed, except Claudius. And Claudius has the opportunity to repent and give up his goods that he got for his murder, but he doesn't do it. And then he heaps on himself damnation, right? He keeps adding crimes. He tries to kill Hamlet several times. He ends up killing his wife. He ends up killing Laertes. He's got a lot on his conscience, or should have. Yes?
Do you take up this apparent admonition to himself when he says, "What's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba?"
Okay, why does he say that? Because the player has been so moved by portraying the scene of the death of Priam that he's got tears in his eyes, and it's very moving. And Hamlet then has this soliloquy where he says, that was just a play. That was just a speech from a play. And yet the actor was so moved by it. How come I'm not moved enough to kill Claudius? I've got a real reason, not just a fictional one. But that's when he's in his passion and furious with himself. But by the end of that speech, he is saying, the ghost that I've seen, the spirit I've seen may be a devil, right? I better make sure. And he's right to do that. He's right not to just go off and kill Claudius in a passion before he knows for sure. So everything Hamlet does up until 3:3 is right. He wants to kill the king, but he doesn't do it, and he doesn't do it for good reasons, and he figures out a way to test whether he's guilty, and then he proves that he's guilty, and then at the crucial moment when now he knows he's guilty, he doesn't do it for evil reasons. So that whole speech about... Now, there's a parallel in the scene that the player is doing, right? The death of Priam. Priam is killed by a younger man, the son of Achilles, Achilleus, and there are two things going on. One is it's an image of Claudius killing Hamlet Sr. that Hamlet wants to see to get himself worked up. And the other is it's an image of the Avenger killing, like Pyrrhus is killing Priam, is Hamlet killing the king. And that happens in the play within the play too. He calls for the Avenger, but the play ends too quickly for us to see him. Okay, so the point is Hamlet is intentionally asking the player to do a scene that's going to reflect on the reality that he's facing now. Yes? Does that answer your question?
Well, I just wondered if you took it up in your book. I haven't read the new book.
Well, there's probably a lot of notes on that speech.
Okay,
yeah.
read that.
If I don't satisfy you in the notes, call me and I'll explain. You know where to find me.
Do you think Shakespeare intended for us to feel in such circumstances we can only truly forgive someone else when we're faced with our own mortality?
The point of doing the play is what Aristotle said is the purpose of art, which is enjoyment and instruction. So he makes the play very enjoyable, and he also makes it instructive. And if you can learn the lesson before it's too late in your own case, great. The point is not that only when you're dying do you get it right, necessarily. It may be true for some people, and it is, but that's not the point of the language. The point of the language is they got it right before it was too late, providentially. In other words, they were permitted to get to the point where they could do that before they died. And that suggests that even in that is heaven ordinate. That's the point. Now, you said this is Shakespeare's greatest tragedy. It might be, but comparisons are odorous, and I would put Lear up against it, and Othello and Macbeth as well. They're all four great, great plays, and they're doing different things.
She knows not just through Hamlet and through the scene in the closet, but also from Horatio what happened on the trip, and that he was sent
No,
there.
there's absolutely no. There's a scene where Horatio is talking to the queen and about Ophelia having gone mad, and she's about to come in, and it's a question of casting in the originals, and the two authoritative versions differ a little bit. There's a gentleman in one of them, and Horatio does the part in the other. And it doesn't really make sense for Horatio to be saying the particular things he's saying. I tried to, indicate that. But no, there's no telling the queen what happened on the sea voyage. It's not part of the play. The first quarto, I believe, is a memorial reconstruction by three or four actors who played in the play and were reconstructing the play as best they could remember it. And their memories were pretty good for the scenes in which they played, but they're awful in the scenes which they didn't. There's one hilarious moment in the To Be or Not to Be speech where Hamlet says, "To be or not to be, that is the question," and then something, 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 and then he says, "Wait, aye, Mary, there it goes," and then he goes on with a few more lines of the speech. And it's the scribe writing down what the actor said, and the actor said, "Aye, Mary, there it goes, now I remember." But the first quarto is, you only use it in an extreme pinch to give some hint of what it might have looked like on the stage, and certain lines, but for the most part, it's not to be trusted. The folio and the second quarto are both authoritative, and they're pretty much the same, but there are some differences. I'm trying to get at what Shakespeare essentially means by the play, and both are coming from him. The folio has some actorly accretions, like things added on. When Hamlet shouts, "Oh, vengeance," that's probably the actor. It's probably not Hamlet. But anyhow, I explain as much as I can about that in a short section called "A Note on the Text" at the beginning, and it tells you how I use the different versions.
Orson Welles said that the ghost character is the most difficult of all the roles, and that it is the key to the play. And he also thought that the best actor should play the ghost, and a quote-unquote up-and-comer should play Hamlet. What is your assessment of that? What do you think? That's Orson Welles.
Orson Welles is being a showman when he says that. And he's a great showman. Look, you want the best actor you can get to play the ghost, and you want the best actor you can get to play Hamlet. And Hamlet's young, and the ghost is old. And it's just, there's no such thing as an up-and-comer. An up-and-comer can be a genius and brilliant, and he can be an idiot. So.
Who is your most memorable Hamlet? Like the actor John Gielgud gets a lot of acclaim. Is there a actor that you liked, and is there a particular, like the 1948 edition of Hamlet, or did you like the modern version, 1996?
I have never seen a production of Hamlet that has completely satisfied me. I enjoyed the Branagh Hamlet, not because of him, but because Derek Jacobi was the best Claudius I've ever seen. I love Olivier's voice and the way he reads lines, but his interpretation of the play is bonkers. It's all wrong, and it's severely cut. I've not, didn't see the Gielgud, I never saw Gielgud do it. We did a reading online a year or two ago, Richard Baird playing Claudius, and that Hamlet was superb. And I played the ghost once, by the way, in a dramatic reading at the school.
Is the ghost the key to the
And I was really good. What?
Is the ghost the key to the play?
The ghost's instruction to Hamlet is the key to the play, because it's the main challenge to the main character, right? Avenge my murder, but taint not thy mind. That's the key to the play. That's the challenge. How is that even possible? And the play unfolds how it's possible. But the turning point of the play is the fall in Act 3, Scene 3, and the fruit, or the climax, or the lesson, or the redemption, if you want, comes in those lines I read at the end. The forgiveness and the divinity that shapes our ends, and the readiness is all, and let be. Those are the great moments of fruition before the demise of the characters. So I detect that you are looking for a reductive sentence that'll put this play in a box, and I'm not going to go there. It's too great to put it in a box.
I just wanted to see what you thought of this guy.
Yeah, well, that was fluff. And Bloom also. 50% of Bloom is very intelligent and well-read and knowledgeable and illuminating, and the other 50% is just silly and folly. And you just have to distinguish, where he's getting it right and where he's bloviating.
Well, what about the James Joyce theory then?
Which is, Hamlet, Shakespeare's son.
Yeah, they
Hamlet.
argue that the Dane, Hamlet, and Hamnet, Shakespeare are twins, and the ghostly Shakespeare is the father to Hamlet. That comes from
That is James Joyce being psychological and very inventive. It has nothing to do with Hamlet. Really, nothing to do with
He
Hamlet.
felt Ibsen was better, actually, than Shakespeare.
Joyce thought?
Yes.
Well, that just shows you that Joyce could be bonkers himself. Ibsen did write a great play. The Peer Gynt of Ibsen is a great play. But it's the only really great play. The others are just annoying. They have their points, of course. But I'm spoiled by Shakespeare. Other questions? Comments?
Thank you.
Arguments?
Thank you.